And now I have the privilege and honor to introduce another brother that I absolutely love, and that's Marco Morelli. Marco is a husband. He's a girl dad. He has 2 daughters. He's in Longmont, Colorado, and he's a poet and a writer. He's on the Collaboration Journal Editorial Advisory Board, also the journal of the Integral Yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And he founded Cosmos Cooperative, probably co-founded. There's been so much input on it, but Marco is a true visionary and a manifester. He doesn't just live in the clouds. Everything is a manifestation with Marco. And Cosmos Cooperative, he's going to talk about today, so I don't need to go into it. But it has a journal aspect, and the aspect that we connected through is called Infinite Conversations. And I love the logo. It's the infinity sign with as 2 talking bubbles. It's such a masterful logo. And they founded it. I'll let him share the details and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm so sorry, but it was founded to bring people together to discuss big questions and to read things associated with big questions like Gebser and the bubble guy, Slaughter something. Marco can correct me. Sorry, Marco. And then eventually they circled around to Life Divine, and a mutual friend connected Marco and I, and we started conversation around it, and the decision had been made to read Life Divine at a rate of 50 pages a week and come together once a week for 2 hours and talk about it. And there were many people there, a few that hadn't been, that knew nothing of Sri Aurobindo, and a couple that really knew a lot about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And we mixed in that space, and it was really beautiful. And as far as forums go, a compare and contrast that I had in my head was Auroconf. And if anyone knows the forum of Auroconf, it's a testy forum. And in comparison, I saw people with differing ideas that were really well behaved toward each other in a loving way. And I was drawn in. I was drawn in by the community, and in Marco's sharing, one idea that I love behind it is we're all dispersed. How do we come together and build a community that can hold more consciousness as a community? And with that, I'll pass it to Marco, but with one last statement. Coleman Barks, who did all those lovely renderings of Rumi into poetry form, has this little tiny volume called Say I Am You. And he starts it off by saying, in Sufi circles, there's prayer. And a step above that is meditation. And a step above that is conversation or sobet. And with Marco, anytime we're on the phone or in group, it's that rich. And I don't think we've ever had a phone conversation less than 3 hours. It's like impossible, because we just go, boom, drop right in. And I'm sure that we can all share that today. Logistically, Marco's gonna talk until about 5:45 or so Pacific, and then we'll have no, I'm sorry, I got that wrong, until 5:15 Pacific, and then we'll have another 30 minutes until 5:45 where we have an open conversation about what's just been shared, same as before with Pravir. Yeah, and then we'll all have a few closing remarks about tomorrow, and then another 10-minute musical meditation brought to you by Jonathan Kay.
I've been looking forward to this. And as you know, Matteo, and as Jonathan, probably you and Linda know, I had some butterflies coming into this event. I've tended to work at a smaller scale with fewer, more intimate groups. Not because I don't want to speak a message to the world, or I don't have something that I want to get across, but I think probably for a few different reasons, one being my own resistance or reluctance to putting it all out there, and then the other being that in our contemporary world, people don't tend to, it's hard to slow down, right? It's hard to quiet the mental chatter or allow it to settle, and just to be present and to allow for something to arise, something in consciousness to arise, a conversation between oneself and others to really authentically happen. It's a real gift when it can. And it's a rarer, I think, occasion when people can do it collectively and intentionally. So I really appreciate, Matteo, that you've highlighted the conversational aspect of my work, because it is where I find the most depth and meaning, and where I feel the most joy arises, when it's not just me and my vision talking to myself and chattering, or you know, doing your thing, but when we're able to disclose some aspects of ourselves, resting in a sense of common presence and see what happens. And what I've witnessed unfold when when all those magical conditions are able to come together, because it's not always so easy, is there's a kind of magic. There's a magic of resonance, of mutuality, of seeing something new in others, feeling like something in yourself has been seen, and also that, you know, we have different layers to ourselves. Like we have our social masks, our personas, who we say we are, who, you know, the conventional world wants to, you know, regard us as, and how we have to play various games or play by certain rules in order to, you know, keep things moving along. And then there are the subtler aspects of who we are. We could say our soul level. We could say our emotional selves. There's a lot to it, right? And it's not just who I personally, myself, as an individual ego identify as, but also my social, cultural, ecological context. All those aspects of myself, suddenly, when we're not taking them for granted and just going along with whatever is the program that's running, they become available for introspection, for sharing, for exchange, for learning. And out of that, something creative happens. Okay, so we met a few times and talked about what I might offer. I expressed these butterflies that I had because there's some really specific, like contextual, I think, facets to this gathering that like I'm entering into, and I'm trying to do so mindfully, and I'm trying to be conscious of where everybody's coming from, or where I might imagine they're coming from, and where I could feel them, and where I'm coming from. Part of what I first expressed to you and Jonathan and Linda, and you were really lovely just to let me, you know, like let out my misgivings or my hesitation. Is that you know, this is an annual conference of the Aurobindo Association of the United States of America, the AUM, right? And this association has been going on for what, 47 years, something like that. just celebrated another anniversary, right, Matteo? You can correct my details and please feel free. As you mentioned, Matteo, we came into dialogue around this reading group that we were initiating in Cosmos and on Infinite Conversations, this discussion forum around the life divine. And then, there's a whole bunch of history there, but one of the things that I feel is more authentic for me is that I've been through different communities and I've studied different spiritual teachers, and I don't myself identify, I don't say that this body mind, Marco Morelli, is a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, for example, or a devotee. However, as you know too, I also come to this community and to Sri Aurobindo's work with a profound respect and gratitude and awe, actually. And it's like I'm a student. I feel like often like a little boy on a beach, and there's a huge ocean of wisdom and brilliance and shimmering waves before me, and I could maybe go in with my little play cup and take some water out and build a little sandcastle of my thoughts with what I'm absorbing from that, what I'm taking from the beach, from that ocean. But there's no way that I possibly could, claim a great insight or a great understanding of what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother offer in their work. And I know enough to know that, let's say. But I do think part of what I could offer in this context and to this group is more of my personal experience, more of my first person experience, discovering Sri Aurobindo's work through this group that we did, which has been followed by other groups. And so in 2018, I'll go back and recount some more history, but in 2018, we organized this reading group for the Life Divine. And we did that pretty madly. Wouldn't do it again in this way, like you said, in 6 months, reading that intensely. But the good news is that we followed that. We slowed down a lot. And we followed that with a reading of Savitri beginning in 2019, which is ongoing. And we actually read it line by line, and we take turns. And we leave time for reflection and discussion, and we leave space for the mental chatter to subside and for the text to speak to us and through us, because we ourselves are putting ourselves in the text and reciting it aloud. And that's been one of I think, a really magical practice that has emerged for us in our group. But of course, other groups are doing the same thing, and it's an ancient practice going back to every religious tradition, is to intone poetic and spiritual language and to use those as conduits to infuse our physical, emotional, and mental realities with higher insights. And then the work begins of well, now how do we actually make it practical? So that's a bit of a abstract expressionist, just smattering of kind of insights, or not insights, but history. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. If I'm not approaching Aurobindo as a devotee or as a disciple, for my own karmic reasons, not because I don't think it's worthwhile, and I know that it is, how am I? And you mentioned that Cosmos is a kind of intentional community that's attempting to hold more consciousness. And where did that come from? Why would we be doing that? I'm going to just tell a little bit of my personal history and get it out, and then from there bridge to our collective. So where I want to go, kind of a bigger structure for this, is talk a bit about cosmos, talk a bit about our readings with Sri Aurobindo and the mother and the small communities we formed around that, and then address some of the theme of the conference, which is the collective yoga, because I think that that's something that we've tried to take on, and maybe sometimes with different language, but I find it I find that there's a lot that I want to learn, and a lot of room I think that we have to explore possibilities. And then I think we can talk about, you know, what's happening now, what we might do next. What is this, you know, this partnership, this collaboration? Like, I want to take these terms like at their face value, right? We can name things and brand them, but what do they really mean? So so I say I identify as a poet and a writer. What does that's just this body mind, right? That's just this manifestation, this incarnation. That's this particular karma, right? But it does mean that, and this is something that I've learned over time, that one takes on a certain, like, if you decide to play that game, if you say, okay, it appears that this energy is coming through me, this way of seeing the world, what does it mean to live that? And what does that mean for any of us who have a sense of their soul, right? Because what I see in people is that we all have this soul. Sri Aurobindo may call it the psychic being, and it wants to express itself. It wants to bring its truth, its unique kind of insight, its unique expression of divinity. And because of the way the whole cosmos is set up, we encounter this intense resistance to it in the world at large, unless we have people around us who see it in us and are willing to give it the space it needs to come forth, to manifest, are willing to cultivate it. I wasn't able to participate yesterday in the events, but I got to listen to Devashish's talk about the crisis that we're in. And when in my teenage years, I grew up in New York. Let me back up. I grew up in Long Island, New York. My mom was from El Salvador. My dad was from Italy. They were both immigrants. And you know, they came to the United States seeking opportunity, a better life, all the things that in the mythos of the United States, and the truth of it, people came to this country for it at one time. My environment was kind of multicultural. I didn't necessarily feel like I fit in anywhere in particular, but I also saw people from all over the world. New York was a kind of microcosm of the whole globe. And at a certain point, like, I was activated. And something that was dormant in me, something that was just this, maybe that witness self, that observing, going through the motions, going through school, trying to get good grades, watching TV, you know, eating, playing with my friends, like that unconscious mode was activated. And for me, it was activated by art, by literature, by music, and by this kind of sense of a wider reality beyond what I was learning in school, beyond what was coming through to me through the television. And it was a kind of violent eruption, right? It's something that is really disruptive. And I experienced that personally, like with my mental health in my teenage years and going into college. But we have experienced that culturally as moving in, like Devashish was saying, from pre-modernity to modernity into this post-modernity, where it's like the infinite has crashed into the finite. And all the old rules or all the old things that we think we could take for certain, we take for granted, are no longer um, just available to us. So I went through a huge personal crisis. Like, I thought I was going crazy. I was extremely depressed. And then I went to college and I got into existentialism. And I discovered Frederick Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger and Michel Foucault and these other, Jean-Paul Sartre, these philosophers who were tearing the veil from the conventional world, what they called the bourgeois world, and exposing like the huge void that was behind it all, and like the raw instinctual aspects, right, of reality. But and that maybe didn't, I mean, that was, let me put this, it would have been good to have a community. It would have been good to have other people who had other perspectives. I was very fortunate to meet a philosopher who was my philosophy professor, Martin C. Dillon, Binghamton University, and one or two friends who seemed to be able to relate to me, and then a graduate student from Czechoslovakia at the time, who was teaching a course on beat poetry. And so through that combination of elements, I suddenly got exposed to this wider world of thought and of practice, because the beats, like Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, a whole kind of subculture, they also were attuning the Western culture to the East. So they were reading Zen Buddhism, and they were reading Yogananda, and they were traveling too. They were traveling to India. I haven't traveled to India. Many of you have been there and spent time at Aurobindo, at other places. They were traveling to Europe, and in a way, they were trying to create this integration in their own wild way, in their own many ways unconscious way, in many ways like destructive, self-destructive way. But they were trying to, in their art, in their music, in their literature, bring these different sides together, like the everything that Western civilization has created through all the revolutions, the scientific revolution, the Western Enlightenment, German idealism, Darwinian theory, capitalism, like everything, with this wisdom of the East that has a different set of kind of different cosmologies associated with it. And what's going to be an expression of that? Okay, I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to tell a bigger story, so bear with me. So I wasn't that like practical at the time. I just kept studying philosophy. I didn't think about, well, how am I going to make a living? How's this going to apply? Like, I had the privilege not to have to do that, but I only had a limited privilege. It only lasted so long because I soon crashed into like the post-college reality. And my time since then has been like an exploration of that world that opened up, and how to integrate that in myself with my soul expression, and then how is this going to work in reality? All right, I'm going to take a pause there and just ask you, Matteo, if there's anything you want to interject or bring in or remind me of. Am I going good?
You're going great.
Okay. So I got really into my head, and I was reading Heidegger. Heidegger's hard to read, but his basic point And the thing that I really took away from it was Heidegger brought together, Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, 20th century philosopher, he brought together this question of being, this isness, and the world. So being and the world. Being and the world. And his formulation in Being and Time, his kind of magnum opus, was it was an existential analysis of human being in the world. All one word. Or hyphenated word. And so that kind of put me onto this quest. How can I embrace the world? Like, how can I be in the world? Like, it's very simple, right? We just need to like sit with it for a second. Debashish yesterday, he invoked a quote from the mother. If you can be conscious of the whole world at the same time, then you can be conscious of the divine. If you can be conscious of the whole world at the same time, then you can be conscious of the divine. And it was kind of a mantra that I think he introduced into his talk. And he talked about this kind of modernity, which is driving us mad. We're in this moment of global crisis, coronavirus, the threat of World War III, climate catastrophe looming. We all know the litany of these crises, and it's like there's no way we can mentally put it all together. It's too much. So there has to be another way. Like it can't be about a mental, like figuring it out. Like there has to be another way to be conscious of the whole world. And through that path to allow to open to the divine. So I'm going to tell, I know I have to skip some parts, but after college, I decided to do volunteer work and travel to Central America, Nicaragua, and I sought out like the truth. Like I sought out the people, I sought out the history, sought out the geopolitics. I tried to learn something about the relationship between our countries. After Nicaragua, I discovered the work of Ken Wilber. Some of you may know him as another integral philosopher, another integral thinker. Wilber was influenced by Sri Aurobindo and by a whole bunch of other philosophers, thinkers, scientists, visionaries. Jean Gebser is another one that you mentioned. And I worked with Integral Institute, Ken Wilber's think tank, between 2003 and 2007. I co-authored a book with him and a couple of others called Integral Life Practice. That was in 2007. And that was a kind of articulation through the Wilberian, kind of Wilber's version of integral theory of a kind of integral yoga. Like, how do you live this? How do you live that expansive consciousness in your day-to-day life? And that involved, like, say, meditation, but it's really the integral idea. So I got that from Wilber. And, but I also, it was also that time at Integral Institute, an attempt to create a different kind of community. Like Wilber was channeling the integral idea and also wanting to apply it. And so this community developed of people that were trying to live integrally and trying to do business integrally, trying to do medicine integrally, trying to do art integrally, trying to do education integrally. And I lived through that, a really intense time of going from an organization of like 4 people when I started to like 40 people when it kind of fell apart or morphed into something else. It evolved into something else. But I decided that at that point, like, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for. Like and that led me to Cosmos. It took a few years, but as I kind of am reflecting on being an artist, wanting to bring forth a vision, witnessing the crisis of the world, learning about this idea of integration and of how we can bring together body, mind, spirit, the vital, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, self and other, how we can kind of transcend our national and ethnocentric identities and root ourselves in a bigger identity. How also we can, and this is also coming from the theme of this conference, the individual and the collective. Can we have a collectivity that's fully honoring of our individuality, of our uniqueness? Or does one have to kind of trump the other? No, it doesn't. Obviously, it doesn't. We know it doesn't. And yet, most of our organizations and most of our communities kind of don't presuppose that. And you know, we have a nation state world, and we have a corporate world, and we're in this kind of capitalist dystopian vortex kind of death spiral. And what came to me is like, if art can't like really say something and do something about this, then it's not worth it, right? Like if our efforts at creating beauty or writing poetry or making music or whatever isn't like concretely bringing us into that wider embrace, like bringing us into communion with the world, like if it's just a personal entertainment, or if it's just, that's all fine. Like we all need that too. But I think art needs to serve a bigger purpose. And it needs to be a trans-political purpose. Like I'm like, just before we started this meeting, I was in the house, my wife Kayla let me know that a bit of news. I mean, this is the kind of thing, it's like bad news every day. But the author Salman Rushdie, who you may know, he wrote a pretty famous novel called The Satanic Verses back, I think it was the 80s or 90s, and had a jihad put on his head. He was attacked at a literary conference in New York. He was stabbed. He's in the hospital now. Like, why? Right? This is like what's at stake is, I think that the purpose of art is to create a context for this new world, for this new society that we all know is possible. Like, and we all know it's like through that tunnel, it's through this darkness that we're going to manifest something different and something new. So I had some very profound experiences. Like another thing Debashish talked about was like that experience that he had in Chicago. And I had my own version of similar profound experiences where it's just like I was broken open. Like I need something new. I need a vision. And this idea came to me of trying to create a platform, trying to create a place where people can gather and share their souls, share their soul work. And not everybody has to be an artist or a poet or something like that, but it's really about our souls. And then how do we turn that actually not into more than a social club? So Cosmos, the idea was like the most general possible idea. Like Cosmos is everything that is, was, or ever will be. Those are Carl Sagan's words from his book called Cosmos, which is more a scientific view of the universe. It's the most general word in English I could think of. Like it was just meant to be a placeholder for the widest possible non-exclusive community that I could imagine. Like someone also in a question brought up the idea of the council of all beings, and that sense that, well, there's nobody excluded from Cosmos. There's no being that is excluded from Cosmos. So that's an image. And he also talked about the transhuman. And I share this, like it's a kind of double-edged sword. I share the critique of like the techno-futurist, technocratic kind of transhuman that wants to all like regulate us all for the sake of global capital. And also this sense of the Nietzsche also had this idea of the superhuman, that we are a bridge to the future, the supermensch. But I want to propose a slightly different image, and this is an artistic, poetic act, right? This is meant to give us an image to resonate with, and that's the cosmic human. Who's the cosmic human? I like being a human. I like having a body. We don't all like it all the time. It's not always pleasant or fun, right? We get ill, we die, and so on. But we make love, we smell flowers, we see sunrises, we have children who are beautiful and express all the innocence and all the freshness of the cosmos. I want to put forward an artistic image and of the possibility of being human and being cosmic at the same time. That could be, and the human aspect of it is, the human refers to the humus of Earth. It means that we're earthly, made of matter, made of energy, and we're cosmic, we're spiritual, we're souls, we're eternal, right? Those two can come together in us as individuals and as collectives, right? So the cosmos itself is like an image of it's a mythos, you could say, of that union. But then in practical terms, all right, how do we really do it? And what is like the hard work? And here's one of the two things that really attracted me to Aurobindo. One is that he's a poet and a writer, and an amazing one. And it's like at some point in my journey, like reading different philosophers, different poets, different novelists, I found Aurobindo. I was like, whoa, this guy is something different. and Wilbur was a great writer too. I fell in love with Wilbur's books, and I moved from New York to Colorado, and on nothing. Like, I had no connections. I just came out following the call of spirit and was able to it all worked, like the divine worked its magic. And I coming from I was a philosophy degree, I didn't have professional career goals, and I was able to get a job working for a philosopher, but it turned out to be this introduction to a whole nother universe. The other thing about Aurobindo is that, and the mother, and again, this is a mythos for me because I haven't been there, but they also found a community and industries and economics and transforming land. Andrea, who has been in the Savagery reading group with me and John Robert and Jeffrey Jen Edwards, has told me about planting trees there. And what a wonderful, and turning like a barren landscape into a forest. Like, what a wonderful concrete way to divinize the earth, right? To bring all the love and the spirit and the spacious, like that is art there. So there's like art in the sense of music and poetry and words, but then there's like larger kinds of art. And I see these experiments, and there are many of them. The Aurobindo community is one. The integral community of Ken Wilber is another, and the Gabesarians are another, and those who are studying Rudolf Steiner or Teilhard de Chardin, or there's so many sources. And depending on our karma, we align and resonate with one or the other. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take that artistic image, that poetic idea, and I wanted to say, what would it mean if we turn this into an actual thing? So the manifestation piece. And that's where the cosmos became a cooperative. Because I thought, well, like in my experience, the times when I've really felt close to people, the time when I felt like we developed solidarity, like when I was doing volunteer work in Nicaragua, or when I was working with Integral Institute and collaborating on a website or on a book, like that's when we work those issues out of our individuality and our collectivity, and that's when we formed community. It's by doing something. It's by meeting our needs and meeting our goals and our aspirations. And so I thought, well, if I can get people together who feel this artistic drive, however it expresses itself, like that psychic soul being, that has this interiority to it. If I can get them together and we can collaborate on producing work, on making a living, on addressing issues, like imagining different ways of thinking about life, thinking about politics, thinking about economics, then that could be a powerful thing. That could be a powerful, like, artistic thing to do and a practical thing to do, like a revolutionary thing to do. And this is like the last 6 years of my life, and it's tiny. It's like just maybe 20 or 30 people who have come together because I started just wanting to talk, wanting to have conversations and just get this idea and try it out. We started our first event was a reading group for the philosopher Jean Gebser. This was in 2016, and we read his ever-present origin over about 6 or 7 months with, do similar to this on Zoom back in 2016. We then went on to, and that was great because Gebser, he sees a historical development of consciousness in a global context. And he looks at different structures of consciousness going from, in his terminology, magical consciousness, mythic consciousness, mental consciousness, and integral. And they're like geological layers. So we're always, and he was exploring what that integral is. We read Peter Sloterdijk, who wrote this trilogy called, he's a German philosopher, called Spheres. And he looks at how we're always in a sphere. We're always in maybe just the sphere of our mother's womb, the sphere of the family, the sphere of the school, the community, the neighborhood, the national sphere, the global sphere, and how we're always existing in these circles. We read Ursula K. Science fiction is another big influence, another kind of thing that we're drawing in. Ursula K. Le Guin, the science fiction author, Octavia Butler, another amazing writer, and then there's a few other writers in there, a bunch of other poets. We read Milton, Whitman, but always with this kind of like, how can literature and art bring us to share our souls, allow us to kind of express what's inside of us, and help us to dream a bigger dream. And then, and this is kind of the stage we're at now, we've had many conversations, we've read a lot of books, it's been a lot of mental, it's been emotional and heart, but I think it's time to expand that and to be more general, like really like reach out beyond just the artists and find the art in all of us. And like, I see this as a kind of collective art project to show, like, in a microcosm, like what a future society could be like if we're honoring each other, if we're working together, and if we're rooting ourselves in this cosmic sense of self. And so that's what I've been exploring with Cosmos. You mentioned the forum at Infinite Conversations. There's a channel on there that's dedicated to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and all of the Life Divine reading groups that we've done, the Savitri reading groups, and then also Synthesis of Yoga, Marco Massi, who was on here, somewhere around here, and Jeffrey Jen Edwards, and Andrea, and you, Matteo, seeded all these. So these are ongoing experiments, and they're a little bit different because they're both inside and I think outside the Aurobindo sphere. Like there's a kind of Venn diagram there, and I'm finding like that flow is really the beautiful, like that's the generative dimension of this, is that all the insight and the poetry and the vision that is coming through Sri Aurobindo, like who I've not met personally. So it's coming really through you guys. It's coming through the community, right? It's like by the fruits you shall know them. That's being infused into Cosmos and is informing like our way of being and doing things. And then maybe Cosmos through like the collaboration journal. And I've been participating on the editorial advisory board to that, and just offering my presence and my feedback on issues that come up around the journal. Like maybe that helps to help the Aurobindo sphere also evolve and meet these larger challenges that we face collectively. And like I see so many groups that are working on technology, working on different economics, working on different agriculture, working on different spiritualities, working on different business models, like Javier, right? That somehow we have to like start weaving it all together and making all those connections and telling all those stories and practicing getting to know each other in all these different contexts. And like the aggregate of all of that is the seed of the next world, right? Is the seed of the new society. Like it's the next stage in the evolution. That's the intuition that I'm working with, is that like all these threads that we're patiently, not painstakingly weaving is aggregating. And if we make it in time, right? If we're able to really stay true to that, to our personal and our collective integrality, then we may have a chance at emerging beyond the crisis, and something new will occur, and we could break the cycles of war and violence and deprivation and just all the things that suppress and degrade the human spirit. Like I really think that we need to hold this vision of that aspiration, and find all the ways of expressing it and weaving it together that we can. And so I think I've been going on for about 45 minutes just riffing on that. I barely said, a lot of things I wanted to say. I should just mention that one of the participants in the Savitri and in the Aurobindo circles in Cosmos is Jeffrey Jen Edwards, who's a science fiction author and is writing a quintet of trilogies, 15 books series on it's called the Idol Chronicles, and it imagines a far future where humanity has evolved beyond the Earth. It's occupying other worlds all throughout the galaxy. And he's telling the story of different characters in this kind of larger evolution at the point where humanity is going from an individual sense of identity to a collective sense of identity. And this Jeffrey Jen is somebody who came to one of the reading groups and had this creative idea that he was working with, and brought it forth to the group, and we gave him feedback and he continued developing it. And we just published his first novel. It's called Plenum, the first book of Deo. And that's, you can learn more about it on untimelybooks.com. This is a imprint for Cosmos, but it was kind of like the first real product, you could say, a fruit, of all of our collaborations, all those reading groups, all those writing groups. And now we have a novel. I'm working on a book of poetry. Andrea is working on a memoir. And we have a number of other authors and artists who are like working on things. And now we're trying to figure out, and I have a whole bunch of, charts and maps and models of how the cooperative itself would work and our business model and all that stuff. But we're trying to figure out, like, now how do we make it sustainable, and how do we make it open to others to participate, so that we're growing a kind of movement of soul-based creativity that is working in tandem with all the groups out there that want to bring this better world into being. So I'll stop there, open it up for questions and feedback. I'm sure I rambled a whole bunch. And I hope that I hope I conveyed something of like my passion and something of, you know, this vision that I have and that we have, and of my aspiration, you know, to be of service to and to be in communion with a collective aspiration. Thank you.